Screencast is going to cover 5.4, 5.3 and 5.4 in our Dreamweaver Revealed series, 5.3 and 5.4. So we left off working with the little boy. We have a hoopster layer, we have a background layer. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to remove the eyeball on the background layer, just so all we have is the kid showing with transparent pixels behind him. Okay, let's set our default foreground background color. So default foreground background color, and black is going to be our foreground color. Let's come over here to the hoopster layer. Make sure on the hoopster layer, what we're going to do is we're going to lock transparent pixels. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add a border, and the border will be applied only to the pixels on the edge of the boy and the ball because we locked the transparent pixels. So here's what we can do to just add a quick border around the kid. We go up to Edit on the menu, and we're going to Stroke. Stroke refers to a border around someone. Let's make this a outside border of black, and let's change our width to 10 pixels, and let's click OK. And you'll notice that you now get a border around the kid. Goes around the kid, goes around the ball, around shoes, everything. Now let's come back down here to the background layer and turn it on. You can see that that border even pops a little bit more. That's just one way to add a stroke around something and just lock in those transparent pixels. Now let's look at some gradient tools. Gradient tools are pretty powerful. You can use them a lot. I'll cover just a little bit, but you can expand on it quite a bit. Let's go on the background layer. Let's go on the background layer, and let's remove the kid from the scene by just clicking the eyeball. And let's go get the. Actually, let's leave the hoopster image on first, and let's click the eyedropper tool, and let's click on the kid's blue shirt. That gets us the blue in our foreground color. Go ahead and remove the kid from the image, and let's swap foreground background color. It's currently white. Let's change our new foreground color to the swatches palette. I'm going to click one of the reds. Whatever red you want to pick is fine. So you should have a red and a blue, red being foreground color. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a gradient. So if you go up to the paint bucket tool and switch it to gradient tool or hotkey G, gradient tool, what you have to understand about the gradients are there are different types of gradients the way they look. There's diamond, there's like the linear look, there's a circle, there's an angle. So there's lots of different types of gradients you can choose. Then the coloring is the part that's usually confusing. So if you want to use your foreground and background color, you have to click this one here. This shows your current foreground background color that you chose for your gradient. That's called foreground background. So just click on that one, double click it for now. We'll come back to the other ones here in a second. I'm going to use the angle gradient, third one in the middle there, and I'm just going to draw a line, about corner to corner here. That's going to give me a little angled look with a gradient shade on the top corner where I first started to drag. If I add the kid back on, I can see it adds a little bit of something behind. Now there are multiple ways you can use those gradients. I'm going to come back to my histories palette. I'm going to go back one so I can remove that gradient. So let's look at another way to do a gradient. This time, click the gradient drop down arrow. Notice that you have multiple types of gradients. Okay, let's say you want to use this one here, and this one is going to be, I'm just going to click on it. If I double click on it, it just takes my foreground color. Now here's a way you can change the color. If I double click on the actual gradient, let me run that back. If you just come up here to the gradient, just double click, it will pull up a gradient editor. So what we can do now is I can even go back to this, my first gradient here, or I can select one of these other gradients. But if you go back to your foreground background, go to your foreground background gradient, it's that top left one. If you go to that foreground background color, you can change your colors here by clicking on these two little boxes on the left and the right. So if I click the one on the left, double click it, I get a color picker that pulls up. I can change my slider. I'm going to come up with like a light blue, and I'm going to come here and pick the other one. I'm going to pick like, let's say like a yellow, kind of a neon yellow. I then get the gradients to show those different colors. You can change where you're going to be at on the gradient scale by sliding. So I'm going to slide about halfway here. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to make sure I'm on the background layer, and I'm going to drop my gradient in. So in effect, I'm going to be pulling more from the lighter blue side, and the gradient's going to be not as spread out as the other one. But this one's going to be more spread out, show different colors of greens. This is going to be more to the point. I'm going to just undo that gradient, and let's come up here and let's select the gradient tool again, and let's look at the gradient editor. So here's one that's kind of complicated. Let's click this rainbow, the spectrum one. The spectrum is basically a shades from, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 7 different colors, and it kind of comes full circle from red to red. What you can do is you can come in here and you can change what each color is. So you could go a red to black, a black to, let's say, green, and you can control what colors you want it to actually use. And maybe here you want to go back to black, and then you have green, and then you want to go, let's say you want to go back to red. And this one, say you want to go back to black. So you're like keeping a pattern here. Then I click OK, and I add that gradient on the background layer, and I can choose a different gradient this time. And however, how far you make the line determines how much of the gradient you're going to see. The farther you drag out, the more the gradient you're going to see. But each gradient piece up here is a little different. So really play with that and change it. Now, something you can do with your gradient that's kind of cool is come up here and you can change the opacity. If you go to opacity, you can fade this out. And I'm probably not getting mine because I don't have transparent pixels behind it. I have a white background, so I'm not going to see the opacity. But if you look up here, you can see that it's becoming more opaque. And even if I drop another one on there, there it is. The opacity's changed now. So see how I'm adding just like multiple gradients on now because of the opacity? It adds a little different effect. What I really should do is add a new layer and then add gradients on top of it. And you can get some pretty cool looks if you combo gradients up. So gradients, real powerful tools. I barely covered much of it. You could go on all day about gradients, but that covers, let's see, 5.4 and 5.3.